The fight is on! In the last tutorial, you learned how to roll and interpret skill checks. It's primarily focused on the attributes and skills section of the character sheet. Now you'll be using everything else. Let's quickly go over these additional sections so we can contextualize them with the combat system. First, in the upper left-hand corner are derived attributes and other trackers. You might think of it as the heads-up display in a video game. This golden box is the most dynamic area of the character sheet, as these trackers increase and decrease frequently during play. In the golden yellow box are several smaller boxes. The magenta box is where you track your hit points, or HP. This is a measure of your character's overall vitality. The cyan box tracks your trick points, or TP. This is a reserve used for powerful abilities, which are used in tandem with your other team members to deal impressive damage. The box with a yellow circle is where you track how many rings your character has collected. Finally, these four smaller boxes are used to track how much critical damage, or crits, your character has endured. When your character is injured, the GM will tell you how much damage you have taken. You then remove that much HP from your total. When your character uses a tag team attack or other special move with a TP cost, you will deduct TP equal to the cost associated with that particular move. Rings are used to replenish both totals on a 1-to-1 basis. If you take a crit, you mark off the first crit box on your character sheet and lose all the rings you currently possess, and suffer the stunned status effect. You have an opportunity to recover a number of them equal to the number associated with the box you checked off. This process continues until all four boxes are filled. Upon receiving a fifth crit, your character loses all rings, but doesn't have an opportunity to recover any of them. When you run out of HP, you receive a crit at the same time and lose your rings. If you take damage while you are without rings and HP, your character is KO'd and can no longer act until they are revived. In the green box below are three attributes that are tied directly to various combat statistics. Your dodge value is the baseline number of hit dice your character will roll to oppose an acting attacker's roll against you. This follows the rules for opposed checks covered in the previous tutorial, though a dodge roll does not generate tricks, slips, or crits. Your initiative is how many hit dice you roll at the start of combat to determine how quickly you act each round. Unlike other checks, you won't be counting how many results over 5 you generate. It also does not generate tricks, slips, or crits. Instead, you will simply be taking note of the highest number you rolled and informing your GM what the number is. You will then be assigned a corresponding initiative slot that will determine the turn order of all acting characters during combat. Movement is the maximum number of squares your character is able to move during the movement phase of your turn. In this section, there are 4 slots that describe the details of your offensive moves, called signature attacks, as well as additional abilities called talents. Every signature attack has 4 primary components. Name, the name of the attack to distinguish it from others. Skill, the skill that is checked when executing the attack. Damage, the base level of damage that the attack deals with a successful hit. Description, this is where all other variables of the attack are located that aren't universal for all signature attacks. These variables include range, the maximum number of squares away from your character that the attack can reach. Status effect, a secondary debilitating effect that an attack can trigger when certain conditions are met, most commonly when a second uncancelled hit is generated on the attack roll. Some status effects trigger every time an attack is successful. Accuracy, additional advantage or disadvantage that is automatically factored into the roll, adjusting the reacting character's dodge by using the rules for post checks. Area of effect, some attacks will deal all or partial base damage to adjacent squares. Other modifiers, some components of an attack are dependent on certain conditions, such as being tied to a piece of gear that can be removed or tampered with, or by sacrificing mobility during the character's turn. In addition to various signature attacks, a character will have 1 or more talents. These are abilities that distinguish your character from others in a variety of ways, such as resistance to a particular status effect, or additional actions they can perform with a skill check that aren't specifically damage dealing. With that quick overview, we have enough context to run through an example combat. It will start to make more sense soon, I promise. Let's say that the GM is describing a scene to you, but suddenly declares that you and your team have been ambushed by a bunch of robots. Roll initiative, the GM declares. At this point, two important parameters need to be established for all the active characters: timing and positioning. The initiative rolls will determine the timing, while positioning players in an abstracted environment called a battle grid will determine positioning. Let's determine initiative first. You consult your character sheet and identify your initiative value. You grab a number of 6-sided hit dice equal to that number and roll. The other players do the same, and the GM performs this for the characters under their control. To streamline the process, the GM rolls one initiative for the whole group of robots to share, since they all have the same initiative value. You rolled exceptionally well, despite only rolling a single die. You rolled a 6. The enemy egg pawns also rolled relatively well and rolled a 6. The other players rolled a 2 and a 5 as their highest result. Going from highest number to lowest, we have a tie. Both you and an NPC rolled a 6. Players break ties between GM-controlled NPCs, so you go first, followed by the egg pawns. The other two players assume positions according to their respective initiative results. This establishes that as soon as combat starts, you will act first, then all the egg pawns, then Mojave, then Madeline. Then a new round will start with you acting first, and so on, until the combat encounter is resolved. With that determined, next we establish character positions. For this example, we are going to assume that the GM is going to be using a battle map with grid squares. The scenario is going to take place in a room 50 feet by 50 feet with a 30-foot ceiling, which translates to a 5 by 5 grid, as each square represents 10 square feet. The GM places the enemies in their starting position and prompts the players to do the same. Sometimes the GM will have specific directions for positions, but oftentimes the GM will simply designate an area for the players to start in this case, the leftmost column of squares. As a fly-type character, Madeline has a unique ability to hover freely in the air, and in most cases, a fly-type player can choose whether they start an encounter at height 0, that is, on the ground, or up to several feet in the air at height 1. You and the other players decide your starting positions, and Madeline opts to start at height 1, effectively one square of movement upwards. With these initial conditions set, the first round of combat begins. The whole table now turns to you in anticipation. What will be your first action in this exciting encounter? Each turn has up to 3 phases that can be taken in any order. Your move phase is when you may move your character a number of squares less than or equal to your movement attribute. You may also use some or all of your movement to get back up if you were knocked down, or to hop vertically or horizontally up to 1 square. Your interact phase is when you do something small and incidental, such as spending up to 5 of your rings to refill your HP or TP by an equal amount, or use an item on yourself. You can also use it to interact with the environment in various ways, such as opening and closing doors, pressing buttons, and so on. Your action phase is where you go on the offensive and make an attack check, or any other type of skill check that would help you in this combat. You can also forfeit this phase entirely to take an additional move or interact phase. With that being said, let's take a look at your signature attacks and talents to determine what your options are. Both of your signature attacks are melee attacks, which means you must be within 1 square of your target for your attack to connect. You also have a taunt ability as a talent, which has the ability to force enemies to only target yourself, though the ability does no damage by itself. You also have a passive talent that allows you to mitigate the effect of the knocked back status effect when it is inflicted on you. You now see that in order to make the best use of your character, you will want to close the distance between you and the enemy characters and get up close and personal. You have a movement of 2, however, which informs your effective attack range. You could bum rush the egg pawn in the back by sacrificing your action phase and taking 2 move phases, but this would end your turn without attacking and leave you vulnerable on your next turn. So you're better off targeting the egg pawn directly in front of you. You spend your move phase first and move 2 squares to get within melee range of the egg pawn. You don't have anything to interact with at the moment, so you opt to skip your interact phase and move up to your action phase. You declare an attack against the egg pawn using your claw swipe attack. Using the procedure we learned in the previous tutorial, you build your dice pool for your melee skill. The GM consults the stats for the egg pawn and determines that it has a dodge value of 2. Both the player and the GM roll their dice pools and compare how many hits each character generated, and cancel them out with each other. In this instance, you managed to get 2 uncancelled hits against the egg pawn. The first hit deals a solid 6 damage. With the additional hit, you have a choice to make. Do you want to spend the extra hit to deal +1 damage, or do you want to inflict the knocked back status effect? Consult the rules for the status effect and discover that, in this situation, knocked back would actually inflict more damage. This is because there's an egg pawn behind it to stop it from moving backward, so instead will crash into its comrade and convert the 2 squares it was supposed to go into damage dealt to both robots. Now, with one attack, an impressive 8 damage has been dealt to one egg pawn and 2 to another. The GM subtracts the HP from both NPCs, leaving the target egg pawn with measly 2 HP left over. The knocked back egg pawn is also now on the ground, meaning it will have to spend 1 square of movement to get back up on its next turn. Now the turn order moves on to the egg pawns. The GM opts to take action as the egg pawn that was last attacked first. The GM takes the move phase to get the egg pawn back up, but opts to stay in the same spot without spending an additional square of movement. The GM skips the interact phase this turn for this NPC and simply attacks. The attack is rolled, while you roll your dodge, which happens to be a single hit die. Your roll is a wash, while the egg pawn manages to roll a critical trick. Since this is a combat scenario, the GM decides to spend this to inflict critical damage. But before this happens, the 2 hits that were generated by the 9 result are resolved. The egg pawn has no status effect to inflict with its fist, so it simply adds an additional damage, resulting in a net 6 damage. You remove 6 HP from your total, comforted by the fact that you still have quite a bit left. With the crit, however, you mark off a box in your crit section, noting the 8 at the top of the box. You entered this fight with 10 rings. With this crit, 2 of those rings vanish into thin air, never to be seen again. The remaining 8 are redistributed on the grid surrounding your character. Since the egg pawn cannot use or interact with rings, the square it occupies is skipped over when placing rings, and an additional ring is placed on an adjacent square. Had this been an NPC that explicitly uses rings, the ring on its square would have been collected and added to its own total automatically. As part of the crit, you are also afflicted with the stunned status effect, reducing your dodge by 2 until the egg pawn's next turn. Since you only have 1 dodge, your dodge is now 0. The remaining egg pawns take their turns, opting to sacrifice their own action phase in order to reach the PCs on the other side of the room with double move phases. Next up is Mojave. Mojave takes a look at his attack options, and prior to acting on his turn, declares he will be using his spin dash attack, which is a more powerful variant of his spin attack. This reduces his normal movement range of 8 squares down by half to 4. He then takes his move phase, moving no more than 4 squares and collecting some spilled rings. Having fulfilled the conditions necessary to use his spin dash, he makes his attack, which we'll gloss over here for brevity. Madeline also assesses her current position. Her base blaster is a ranged attack that can reach up to 4 squares away. At first glance, she appears to be 1 square away from her target, but her vertical position at height 1 increases this distance by an additional square. With plenty of range to spare, Madeline spends her movement phase to increase her height by 1 additional square, pressing her right against the ceiling. She now has aerial superiority at height 2. This satisfies the conditions to give her +1 advantage on any ranged attack against a target 2 or more height values lower than her, meaning that the egg pawn rolls 1 less die on its dodge when targeted by Madeline's upcoming attack. Again, for the sake of brevity, we will gloss over how this attack roll goes. Now that each initiative slot has taken place, the next round begins, allowing your characters to take an additional turn. You spend your movement to pick up some of the rings you lost, and make an attack to destroy the robot you attacked last turn. At the end of your turn, the remaining rings disappear into thin air. Then, play continues on to the next initiative slot. Rinse and repeat until the battle has concluded. In this case, the enemies were pretty basic, consisting of only henchmen NPCs, but this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what you and your team are capable of handling. So next, we'll be looking at the other options on the character sheet to take your fighting power to the next level.